Live Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Del Vecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corey Sirota, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show. Are you in a role of caregiver to someone, or perhaps you know someone who is a caregiver? It can be daunting, exhausting, and very often overwhelming. Well, you don't want to miss our conversation with Claire Webster, who will be providing us with some valuable tips and advice in a segment we're calling Caring for the Caregiver. Now, Corey, talk about caring for others. Pro or con for wearing the mask in public places?
Considering I have a whole slew of masks, I'd say I was absolutely pro. I'm very pro. If there's something that we can all do to help each other stay safe, I'm for it.
Yeah, I think we're getting more and more sentiment. You do still hear those that are their freedom and their liberties, and okay, fine, I understand it. But I think the tide is really changing. You know, it's so psychological. As you walk into a public place, if you're one of the few wearing masks, then you feel a little awkward. But now we're seeing more and more where if you don't wear a mask in a public indoor place, then you're kind of the one standing out, and that makes it a little easier, I think, to wear a mask. But at the end of the day, we all have to be promoting it, and all have to abide by it. Some people might not like hearing that, but you know what? It's better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
What do we have coming up on the second half, Corey?
Very excited to be speaking with the courageous and lovable Paul Steinberg. He's a man who grew up being bullied, yet he found ways to cope. He certainly had his ups and downs, both as a child, but then even in the business world, he was bullied in the adult corporate world. Imagine that. So we're going to be hearing from Paul and his message of hope, perseverance, and inspiration. That should be just incredible. That's coming up after the 4:30 news.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing from Paul. Corey, you know, there are over 8 million people in Canada that have performed caregiving duties for a loved one. That's 1 in 4 people in Canada over the age of 15. I work with caregivers, as you know, on a weekly basis, and their work, quite frankly, is simply short of described as heroic. And many of them have told me, you know, I wish I would have been better prepared going into this caregiving journey. And it's so true. And that's why we're so proud to have Claire Webster join us. Claire is a certified Alzheimer's care consultant, founder of Caregiver Crosswalk, which is a consulting firm that provides education and support services to help individuals and their families navigate the journey of Alzheimer's disease and or dementia-related illnesses. And Claire is the founder of the McGill University Dementia Education program and an amazing webcast called McGill Cares. I've worked very closely with Claire, and she's a beacon of light for all types of caregivers. Claire Webster, welcome to Life Unrehearsed. So nice to have you back.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Well, thanks for coming on. You I see your work, Claire, and the relief you bring to families, not just for dementia, but caregiving in general. And we're very pleased to have you and thankful to have you to provide some tips and guidance here. Let us first start. We'll back up a bit, Claire. And what motivated you to become a dementia care consultant?
Because of my own experience as a caregiver to my mother, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 2006. At the time, I did not identify myself as a caregiver. I was the daughter who, wanted to assume the role to care for my mother. And what motivated me to do what I'm doing today is the fact that upon her diagnosis, I received absolutely positively no information or guidance from the healthcare system, which resulted in me having a severe burnout along my journey that had a very big impact, not only on the quality of care that my mother received, it had an impact on my health, and it had a ripple effect on my family. And, that was 14 years ago, and to this day, the same thing happens over and over to families. They're not given any information about this very, very ever-evolving and challenging disease.
Well, Claire, there's no question that you hit the nail on the head when you said didn't even realize you were in the role of caregiver, because that's what a daughter does. And so you just did it. And then learning how much support you didn't have and how much you needed. So now I'm going to ask you to put on your consultant hat and tell me, what should I do if my loved one is diagnosed with dementia?
Okay, well, I think the same thing would apply whether it's dementia or any other, challenging illness that involves a cognitive change or a physical change. The first thing you need to do is you need to become as educated as possible on what this disease is, okay? So education is key. Knowledge is power. Understand what you are dealing with so that you are always one step ahead, because dementia is an ever-evolving illness. It can last anywhere between 7 to 12 years. It starts with a cognitive decline, and then it has a very extensive physical decline. So the first thing everybody needs to do is you need to become as educated as possible. The second thing you need to do is you need to understand your options regarding support. What services are available in the community, whether they be not-for-profit resources or for-profit resources. But you cannot go on this journey by yourself. You really need to know what is out there. So all the families that I'm working with right now, you may have a plan A, but in case plan A doesn't work, for instance, if there's a spouse caring for a spouse, if something happens to that spouse, what's plan B? Oftentimes right now, as a result of the pandemic, people who were receiving some type of services at home are no longer receiving those services, so people are really stuck. So if you were getting services from the CLSC and that's temporarily stopped, what other organizations are out there to support you? But you can't go on this alone, The other thing that's important is that you really have to work as a team. If you're many people in the family, everybody needs to work together. I see a lot of conflicts happening among family members because there's always one sibling that feels that they can do that they're doing all the work, and the other people aren't doing the work. So work as a team. And, I think the majority of families are dependent on our healthcare system, that is, the CLSCs. You've got to understand how do you navigate the system, okay? And you've got to work with the doctor. Even if the doctor doesn't, automatically give you that information, you have to prepare yourself. You have to understand how do you navigate the healthcare system. You have to get that mandate. You need to get that proper assessment. You have to get all of your finances and legal matters in order. So, those are the immediate tools or immediate tasks that need to be looked after.
We're talking with Claire Webster. In this segment, we're calling Caring for the Caregivers. Claire, some excellent recommendations. And, we very often refer to the term sandwich generation, which basically means you have your own family to worry about, your own kids, and now you also have the parents to be responsible for. So how would you quickly explain some of the challenges for the sandwich generation?
So when in January of 2005, my father passed away suddenly. Well, not suddenly, but he had congestive heart failure. At the time, I was 38. I had a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 9-year-old. I was working full time. And then a year later, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So I was really caught, when we call the sandwich, I was caught between caring for my young children and then all of a sudden having to care for my mother. And, in this case, as a caregiver, again, I did not recognize myself as a caregiver, but I was put in a situation where, I wanted to do the best thing possible to care for my mother, but I also had young children. My husband has a business. He has things going on in his life and his family. And you get kind of like caught up in a cyclone where you're being pulled in so many different ways. And it's not just like you're caring for one person. You're caring for, young children and all the responsibilities that go along with that. And, one of my challenges was that I never, ever, ever agreed on getting help. Okay. So even on the days where close friends were noticing that, they would offer, could we pick up your kids from school? I'd be like, no, thanks. I'm all good. And I was just running around like a chicken with my head cut off at all times, just trying to keep all the balls in the air, which just is not possible.
No question about that. And I want to hear about what the consequences of doing that are.
Life Unrehearsed on CJAD 800. Brought to you by Marco Vendramini of IG Private Wealth Management. MarcoVendramini.com.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corey Sirota with my co-host Matt Delvecchio, and we are talking about caring for the caregiver with Claire Webster. Claire, you were talking about some of the challenges of the sandwich generation, and I wanted to know more specifically about what are some of the consequences of not seeking support services for yourself as a caregiver. What are the consequences in your around your health, as well as safety, quality of care of the person you're caring for? I'm assuming there's a whole host of them. Can you share some of them with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think also more than ever, because there are so many, caregivers who are feeling very isolated right now. They're not able to reach their doctors. They're not able to get support. People turn to different types of what I would like to say coping mechanisms and security blankets. And I kept trying to wear this mask, making everybody think that I was, strong and managing all. But, my coping mechanism at the time was drinking a lot of wine, trying to just, manage my emotions. I was going through a tremendous amount of anger and resentment towards this disease and towards the responsibilities that it had placed upon me and all the decisions that I had to make. And I realize is that when people are going through very difficult challenges like this in their lives, some people drink, some people use drugs, some people have food addictions, some people have start shopping online. And what I hear a lot from family members, like what I had gone through, is that, once my journey is over, I'll be okay. I'll get myself in shape, or I'll stop drinking because I need it now. But once it's over, I'll be fine. The truth is that the coping mechanisms that you're using to get yourself through this journey do not disappear once the caregiving journey is over. They really stay with you. They can haunt you. They can become serious addictions. My mom passed away in 2016. And, it has taken me a few years to heal from, how the ways in which I had coped. So I think that, people need to be mindful of that. They don't, whatever habits they are taking on, they don't just disappear. There's also a ripple effect that this can have on our health. One of the highest causes of highest health issues for women is cardiovascular disease, one of which that I suffer from. There's also a ripple effect in terms of, your children watching how you are coping. The times that I was getting very angry, using the wine to cope. My children were very young. I was not setting the right example to them at the time, putting too much guilt on myself. So we have to be careful, because we could really get caught up in this own, self-destructive habits.
You're listening to Life Unrehearsed, talking to Claire Webster about caring for the caregiver. And Claire, I love when you talk, because you're talking from the heart, you're talking from experience. And with the caregivers that I work with on a weekly basis, I hear a lot of those situations, because many times you are thrown into the role of caregiver very quickly without even realizing it. And you sort of have, and you've even mentioned this in some talks about this superwoman syndrome, where, hey, I could do this, I could handle it. And before you know it, you go into some very difficult and challenging coping mechanisms. And so, Claire, if you see yourself in that situation, what do you do, and how can family play a role?
Okay, well, I think the first thing you do is that you really need to ask for help. I mean, everybody inside, you have that little, you have that little radar. We all have that little radar that says we need help, and don't wait to ask for help until you're in a crisis mode. And that's why I cannot emphasize enough the importance of if you are a caregiver or becoming a caregiver, no matter what disease you're in, taking care of, please become educated. Please seek out the support from the beginning. The other thing I want to say along this line is what really helped me recover, from my burnout was I had to take stock of my life. I had to really identify the people and commitments that maybe were not adding value to my life at that time, okay? The people that were toxic in my life, or commitments that I had that, when you get those emails or those invitations and you're like, oh God, I don't feel like doing this. Like, I had to clear my plate. And this is what I say to families over and over again. If you're in the heart of caring for somebody else, it's taking so much energy. You have to make sure that your energy, what you have, is full. So clear your plate. Get rid of any people in your life or commitments that are just not adding value, because you have to really take care of yourself.
Such wise words from Claire Webster. Really, Claire, you and I have had numerous discussions, and as most of our listeners know, I specialize in grief and loss, and that's another really important aspect of this whole journey. It's the non-death loss and, in fact, anticipatory grief. So I'm going to throw it back to you again to talk about that.
Yes. So with dementia, I mean, one of the factors that I didn't realize was the concept of anticipatory grief. From the moment that a loved one is diagnosed, because it's a long, ever-evolving illness, you're not only witnessing the cognitive decline, but you're witnessing the physical decline. And so you're constantly mourning, like at all the various stages. And that only hit me, at the very, very end. And, as Corey, I had you I had a guest on my show, and, we talk about that there's not enough support for family members after the person passes away. And so, I never imagined the impact that grief would have on me. So that was another part that I had to really recover from, was, learning to grieve, both of my parents, actually.
In the era of COVID, everyone seems to be adapting and pivoting. And Claire, you do not stop. You in your various roles, you are the founder of the McGill Dementia Education Program. First of all, congratulations! It's a major accomplishment. And you host a webcast called McGill Cares. In fact, Corey was one of your guests. And so, congratulations on that. It's where you want to learn about specifically dementia education. Please head to the McGill Dementia Education Program. You could Google that, and you have an amazing company consulting service called Caregiver Crosswalk, an absolutely valuable service for caregivers, particularly for dementia. Claire, if people have to reach you, how can people do that?
Okay, so they can go to my website at www.carecrosswalk.com. They can reach me at carecrosswalk.com. And most importantly, like you mentioned, Matt, please go to the McGill Dementia Education Program. So that's mcgill.ca/dementia. A wide variety of all kinds of very important for family caregivers, and not only necessarily for dementia, but just there's such excellent resources, even regarding the COVID. And I have a very exciting webcast coming up this Wednesday with Dr. Tamara Sussman, and it will be actually discussing the whole issue of navigating stress and loss when caring for a loved one. And all of the McGill Cares webcasts are on our website, so people could go back and see all the webcasts that I've done.
Just excellent. Claire Webster, thank you very much for joining us again. Such value. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me on the show, Matt and Corey.
Thank you. Corey, such wonderful, Claire, wonderful person, great resource. There are other people doing amazing things. I just want to give a shout out to Jesse Ostroff. He's got a video that just came out. And if you just Googled #JustConnect for Hope for #JustConnect, he did an amazing video for him and his mom, encouraging people to just connect in this time of a lot of social isolation and loneliness. So, Corey, what do we have coming up after the news?
Imagine being bullied as a child and then having to relive all of that traumatic experience later in life in the corporate world. You're not going to want to miss that story from Paul Steinberg. We'll be talking with him after the news.